Hello, everybody. You're all very welcome to another episode of Words on Whiskey, brought to you by Irish Whiskey Magazine. And we're delighted to continue the series. And we have a special guest today. They're all special guests, but John is a well-known personality, individual, professional within the Irish whiskey sector, and he's been in it for a very long time, 20 years as an ambassador, as an account manager, various roles within the industry, and his opinion is very much highly sought after and highly respected. So I'm delighted to have John Cashman with us this evening. John, hello, welcome.
Hey Serge, how are
And
you?
I'm good. And not for your first time on the show. Of course, you helped us with the Discover Irish Coast co-hosting that series. So.
Yeah, I think I was certainly right now. I'm feeling like I was far more comfortable back then when I'm asking the questions rather than sitting here in Magnus Magnuson's hot chair waiting to hear what you have to ask me. But,
I was half hoping you'd be able to conduct the interview yourself. So.
Just give me an hour long of soliloquy and I'll just start talking. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, listen, I don't know what it's like down there in County Wicklow in the storm that we're facing now, Storm Dudley. Hopefully, we won't get it cut off. But
no, obviously, there could always be a possibility. Unfortunately, I do live in rural County Wicklow, so there's a lot of trees around, and all it takes is for one of them to go down over a electricity wire or the internet cable, and boom. But we've had a few power outages already in the past 6 months. The kids got like 3 days without any power, which they went stir crazy without access to YouTube or whatever. So have the candles on ready just in case, but they won't work for this. But look, fingers crossed, we'll be fine.
Yeah, excellent. Look, you're down there in County Wicklow, as you said. Tell us a little bit about your family there, John.
Well,
a couple of young ones.
Yeah, I'm born and bred from Rathdrum, County Wicklow. I grew up on a farm on which I have since built my own house. So my parents were farmers. My dad also worked for a period of time in the agrochemical industry for Monsanto, actually.
Right.
Monsanto has got a bit of a bad rep over the past few years with Roundup, but he ran the company here in Ireland for a number of years. He had a degree in agricultural science, the first of his family to go to university. My mother was a nurse, and then became reared myself and my sister, and then really ran the farm essentially, and became heavily involved in the Irish Farmers Association. She was the first ever lady chairman of a IFA society here. She's a lifetime member of the IFA now. She got that. She was a former president of County Wicklow IFA, so was heavily involved in the Irish Farmers Association. It used to get to the stage we'd be brought up to all the demonstrations in Dublin in the late 1970s and early 1980s. We'd be there holding different placards and whatever for farming. So farming never appealed to me. I never had any interest in it for whatever reason. I remember as a child even setting up office things on a desk, and I have my pen and my pad. It was just sad, really. But so went to primary school here locally, and then went to secondary school in Dublin, and then studied European studies and languages.
Right.
And that's kind of what got me into my career, really, because my degree was it was politics and languages, so Spanish and German I studied in university. But during the summer months, I used to work as a tour guide in Glendalough. I live quite close to Glendalough.
All right, okay, very nice.
So so I found I had an ability to and a confidence to stand up in front of people and tell a story, basically. And when I finished university, I applied for the Jameson graduate scheme, and I did 2 interviews for that, and I was chosen. And the reason I was chosen, I found out afterwards, was they were looking for someone for a brand new market, which was Denmark, and they needed somebody who could stand up in front of a crowd and tell a story. And that's how I got that gig, and that's how I got into this industry. But that's that side of it. But I mean, back to the family thing. My wife is from South Dublin, and we met when we were both working for Cuisine de France. She was the marketing manager for Cuisine de France, and I was a sales guy for a few years. And we met there, and so we got married, and we lived in South Dublin. And then kid number 2 came along, and we had a 2-bedroom apartment, and the crash had happened. We couldn't get rid of it, and we couldn't afford to move anywhere else. So I kind of took a gamble and sort of said to her one evening, "Do you fancy trying out living down the country?" She'd never lived outside of Dublin or Boston. She had a green card as well, so she lived in Boston for a number of years.
Yeah.
So it was a bit of a big leap for her, and but we came down and we rented a house down here in County Wicklow, in Rathdrum, in the same village where I grew up, and she fell in love with the place. Well, maybe not so much the place, but certainly the surroundings. The speed of life, everything like that. And then we started our merry dance with Wicklow County Council to build our own home on the family farm. My father unfortunately passed away a few years ago, and so I took over the farm, which I have leased out, but built a house on the farm. So that's where we are.
What type of farm is it, John?
In my father's day, it was a sheep farm and a tillage and a dry stock farm. So rearing cattle for the meat industry, essentially.
Yeah.
So now the farmer bordering my land is a dairy farmer. So he's always looking for extra land. So it worked out well. So I have the village on one side of me, and then on the other side I have Avondale Forest Park, which the home of Charles Hurt Parnell. So and that's been massively redeveloped right now. There's a €7 million investment going into it. It's going to be this huge destination, tourism destination venue for County Wicklow. So it's exciting times down around here right now. But so that's the background anyway.
Yeah, I mean, that South County Dublin, Wicklow has changed so much, of course, over the last 10, 15 years. It's unrecognizable. But
I remember going to Stepaside, when I was going to school. And I remember Stepaside just had loads of pitch and putt courses, everywhere. Now I think there's only one left. All the rest have been built on,
They're all apartments now.
Yeah. That's change,
Yeah. And a day out to Wicklow was a day trip.
Oh yeah, it was. And now sure half of Wicklow's working in Dublin, or have come from Dublin originally, So all change. But it's hey, look, it's good. It's good.
Well, it's interesting that you joined through the Jameson graduate program. It's a fantastic entry for a lot of people. Well, what do you think was the most important thing you took away from that, John?
Good question. It was, I suppose, one of the things, you're straight out of college, and in my case, I was sent to a city like Copenhagen, which, trust me, when you're a 23-year-old new graduate single, Copenhagen's not a bad city to be sent to, trust me. Apart from it's damn expensive, But straight away, you're given. You automatically get a lot of confidence because you sort of build up a lot of responsibility quite quickly. A lot of it maybe depends on the company in which you're working. And I was working for, at that stage, it was a third party aligned to Pernod Ricard called World Brands Denmark. But since then, they've been incorporated now, I think they're Pernod Ricard Denmark. And they were a small enough organization. You got to remember, a country like Denmark, Jameson wasn't really well known at all. It was very much a Tullamore Dew market, as most of Scandinavia and sort of Eastern Europe was, certainly up until the 1990s. So it was a new virgin market. And I got out there and I just started meeting and greeting people and calling into pubs and just doing the hard sell, which is very much stood me in good stead for the rest of my career, because in the main I was working with smaller brands that people that weren't instantly recognizable, and the only way you're going to get traction, the only way you're going to get sales is by the hard slog. There's no easy way of selling a brand that nobody's heard of before, apart from knocking on the door, going in and getting liquid on lips. So that was one of the big takeaways I got from it, was the effort you have to go to in order to get that sale. And that part was great. And also just how you conduct yourself in other markets. Danish people are very different to Irish people. They tend to be a bit more reserved. But once you get to know them, and once you build up a relationship, absolutely brilliant people, and love to party just like we do. But learning those lessons, and certainly in my latter part of my career with Beam Suntory, when I was responsible for all whiskies worldwide, you really need to know when you go to a certain market or you go to a certain country, how do you conduct yourself in that country? How do you get what you want to get across to them, without being pushy? Because the way you might operate in Texas is very different to the way you're going to operate in Tokyo. So you just have to learn those nuances and realize, how to work the market.
Yeah. And back then, I mean, you were talking about the 90s. What was the perception and if you like, the throughput of Irish whiskey? What was it perceived as back then?
Yeah, well, in Denmark anyway, Irish whiskey was 100% an Irish coffee brand, and that was it. That's all anyone thought Irish whiskey was good for, because that's the way it had been promoted over the previous 20 or 30 years. And that was really the way that, people back in the 1970s, they realized when Irish whiskey was really struggling everywhere, they had to try to find a way to increase the sales of Irish whiskey. And one of those was, okay, let's start promoting Irish coffee. And Irish coffees were always very, very popular in the colder countries. So Scandinavia, Eastern Europe, Germany, some of those places where it's got significantly colder winters than we do. So that was one of the things I had to try to overcome as well, was the fact that, no, look, this product, this Jameson, is not just for Irish coffee. So if you're making an Irish coffee, yes, I'd love you to use Jameson, but you can also ...
Yeah.
straight, cocktails. And cocktail culture, even in Denmark in 99, 98, wasn't huge. There was only a handful of cocktail bars that we go to, so it was also, I also had Powers, and I had the Bushmills brands, and I had Middleton. Middleton very much was just for the airport, but you'd sell a few bottles around Copenhagen and in the Irish pubs anyway. But it was back in the time when there was no interest in redbreast. Pot still as a concept had pretty much disappeared from the 1970s really until the turn of this century. So that was one of the things that really had to change. And also, one of the other things, you go into a bar and you'd see these Scotch brands you'd never heard of before, and they were cheap, nasty looking Scotch whiskies. Long John, I remember all the six in my head just because of my name. And, that was used for Irish coffee. So they didn't. So one of the other things you had to get across was, well, if you're making an Irish coffee, let's make it an Irish whiskey in it first, and if you got this whiskey, well, this whiskey, I can also come in at a later stage and talk about, start doing promotions on whiskey sales or shots or long drinks or something like that, and make it bigger. And one of the things that I started doing in Denmark is a bit of a cliche, but it absolutely worked. I partnered with a local bar in Copenhagen called the Globe, and I would bring Danish off-license owners, shop owners, Danish bar people all into this pub. And I would do a masterclass, do a talk, but we would have Irish music, we would have Irish food, we would have an Irish event. And I would partner then for larger events, maybe with Aer Lingus or with Bord Fáilte. Can't remember. I don't think it was a Bord Bia office in Copenhagen back then. So you'd bring the Irishness and you'd get that across, because Irish bars had a really good reputation in Copenhagen. When Danish people really wanted to go out and have a great party, they would go to an Irish bar. So if you're linking them with that and you're bringing all the Irishness together, you're promoting not just yourself, but you're promoting brand Ireland, which is something that I've tried to do all my life. Even if I was talking about Lefroy or Bowmore or in Tokyo, I'll somehow manage to talk about Irish whiskey as well.
Right.
So it's and that's one of the things. I still talk about it to this day. Brand Ireland is such a good concept that we can piggyback on that, and we can get our whiskies into places that other people just don't have that. Don't have that going for them, unfortunately, but we do. And really in the run up to St. Patrick's Day, you do it as much as you possibly can.
Yeah, I mean, they are synonymous with each other. Brand Ireland really is, the driving force, I think, behind the Irish whiskey, and it does feed back the other way as well. So interesting.
Very much. And I have some of my crackpot theories on the success of Irish whiskey, and one of them kind of links in with this Brand Ireland thing. But I usually, there's something that I call I call it the Bono Effect, and you're thinking about 1980s, before there was any internet or anything like that. A lot of people's first association or even hearing anything about Ireland, when the Irish pub started, was firstly Irish pubs, and secondly, maybe it was the music of U2, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
or the Dubliners or whoever. But U2 were universal, and for a lot
Yeah.
of people, a band from Dublin, a band from Ireland. Ireland, what's Ireland? Oh, there's an Irish pub after opening in our town. We'll go into this town. That pub is playing U2 music. Oh, this place is cool. What drinks do they have? Oh, what's this black drink with a white head? Oh, Guinness. Yeah, I'll try that. Oh, look, there's whiskies. Yeah, Irish is famous for whiskies. I'll try some of those whiskies. So you have this type of thing that comes together, and then you go to things like 10 years later, 15 years later. I remember when Riverdance came to Copenhagen, I partnered with the opening night, and we did sampling and stuff like that. But you think about Riverdance going to Moscow, Riverdance going to Beijing, all these just massive cultural phenomenons. Well, all of a sudden, people are not just looking at this, but they're also looking at Ireland. And you try to link in with that, and you try to use that as a in your benefit, and that's something that I've certainly tried to do for my career.
Yeah, it's certainly around that time, around the Riverdance time, I suppose, that brand Ireland really started to explode. It's when the country started, booming, if you like, whether for good or bad, the boom, but that's another debate. But I mean, if you look at how Irish whiskey has developed over the last 20 years of your career, so has it changed? How has the perception changed, and what's caused that change in perception to occur?
Yeah. What has changed? Massive change and no change, if that makes any sense whatsoever. When I started on the graduate scheme, I started straight out of college. That was 97. So 97, Cooley was only up and running. 97 was up and running, 8 years. Okay.
Yeah.
And really hadn't established themselves yet. John was doing his best, and certainly was getting was beginning to get whiskey out there, and was starting down the private label side of the business and things like that. So there were two established distilleries, and that was Bushmills and Middleton, and at that stage, both of which were still part of Pernod Ricard, so they're both under the one umbrella, and it depended on the market which one was going to be the priority. But you were seeing more that Jameson was becoming the priority. That was coming from the top. Yeah, this is the one we're going to focus on. So the biggest change over the past 20 years is certainly the explosion in the new distilleries and the new brands. But really, that's in the past 10 years. Because I think Dingle started in 2011, 2012. I stand to be corrected, but that's only 10 years ago, and that was distillery number 5, because obviously Kilbeggan had restarted in when was it, 07. So that was only 5, and then you go through the years since then, and you see so many. But what hasn't changed, thankfully, is still, people like Irish whiskey. Irish whiskey appeals to a wider demographic than a lot of other whiskies. And again, another my little crackpot theories going on here, right? I call it the Capri Sun effect. You think of Capri Sun and the drink. Now, when my parents were growing up, the 1940s and 1950s in rural County Wicklow, if they were thirsty, they got milk from the cow or they got water from the well. Okay, that was it. Right. Even when I was growing up, when I was a child in the 1970s and early 1980s, it was pretty much the same. The cow was being milked by my granny. We had the milk. We had water from our well. That's what I drank. Now, on special occasions, parties, things like that, you might get a Capri Sun, or you might get a drink, or a fizzy pop, whatever it is. You look forward to that. Okay. But look at people today in their 30s and maybe early 40s, but certainly 30s and early 40s. There's been far more access to sweeter styles of drinks. So without actually realizing it, there's an entire generation, the generation maybe just below me, who automatically have a sweet taste bud in their mouth without knowing it. So when they're going to look for alcohol, if they're deciding to drink alcohol, and of course today so many more are not drinking alcohol, but if they are, they tend to be more directed, not so more directed, but tend to have more of a taste for some of the sweeter styles of drinks. And I always use, if you look at Ireland as a classic example, over the past 20 years, there's been all these little waves of popular drinks, okay, that become very popular for about 2, 3 years, and then they disappear, and then they're replaced again by something that is really, really sweet. So when I started going out, some of the girls who I hung around with were drinking Pernod and Black. I mean,
Yeah, I
some of the
remember that
people on
drink.
on this might know what that is. That's Pernod and Blackcurrant. Sickly sweet. I mean, it's like with some of those licorice sweets that you can get in Lidl that are
Yeah,
they're licorice and they have a blackcurrant center, and you break into them. Really, really sweet. Well, that died away pretty quickly, thank God, because it was disgusting. But it was replaced with the beginning of the alcopop phenomenon. And I'm
yeah,
talking before Smirnoff Ice, but I'm talking, all these brands that have well since disappeared. Okay.
yeah,
So all those crazy brands disappeared. Smirnoff Ice survived, and it became the drink that everyone was drinking when I was in my early mid 20s, maybe. Okay. Everyone was drinking Smirnoff Ice. Then all of a sudden, Smirnoff Ice became unpopular, probably because it bloody rotted everybody's teeth. But it disappeared. And what was it replaced with? It was replaced with Captain Morgan and Coke. You
yeah,
know, and
yeah,
the Captain Morgan wasn't the Captain Morgan that I had drank 10 years previously. It was a whole new Captain Morgan. It was a sweet vanilla spiced Captain Morgan. But what had it in common with the other waves? It was sweet. And
yeah,
then you go out today, or 3 years ago, nobody's drinking Captain Morgan and Coke. What are they drinking? They're drinking gin and tonics. And it's not just a gin and tonic that I would have drank years ago, where you just go in and you get a highball glass and you cork dry gin and a Schweppes or whatever. No, it's an Instagrammable tulip with loads of different, like it's filled to the brim with tonic water, which is going to be full of sugar and sweet. But then you throw in all the other fruits and stuff like that to make it even sweeter. Okay.
yeah,
So that became really popular. Now that's over the past few years, that's not as popular as it was. And now it's what you call it, the likes of White Claw and things like that. What do
yeah,
they got in common? They're sweet. So inherently people have sweet tooths when it comes to alcohol. Now, the Irish whiskey industry is sweeter. I mean, it's one of the cliches, but it's true. And over that same period, it's been rising gradually, thankfully. And I would hope that we never become one of those waves, because if you're at the top of one of those waves, every wave crashes. And I
yeah,
don't want the whiskey to get to there. So, but we have been growing gradually. And you look to the big markets over the past few years for Irish whiskey, the likes of the United States of America. Where did that start from? Well, it started with the great work that Pernod Ricard were doing. But what did they do? They focused on bartenders who, in the US, there is this concept of a bartender will suggest a drink, or the bartender buys you a drink after you've had a few drinks. So you incentivize the bartenders to buy a Jameson. And buying the Jameson for that 21, 22-year-old, college grad or whatever, who's in there, who is maybe drinking bourbon or maybe drinking something sweet. Well, here's an Irish whiskey. Oh, wow, what's that? Well, it's Jameson, slam it back. Wow, that's nice,
yeah. Well, I
And
mean, it
that,
does make sense. You go to
again,
a bar in the States to drink an Irish whiskey,
yeah.
so that was something that was lacking. But I mean, I think that sweet trend is permeating not just in alcohol. I think you see it in foods
Oh,
and
yeah. See it in
as
everything.
well.
I
So
mean, yeah, get a loaf of bread and look through it, and you're going to see sugar in it.
yeah,
Things like that. So yeah, and it is. But as I said, it's inherent now. People don't realize it, and thankfully, I mean, Irish whiskey, we're not doing anything to make it sweet, but it does appeal. But bourbon as well, and people often forget that.
yeah,
Bourbon is growing quite well internationally too, and not just bourbon, American whiskies. I mean, Jack Daniels, Jim Beam, Maker's Mark, but also the explosion of craft distilling in the United States as well has taken off, and bourbon, is okay, different to Irish, but it does have a sweeter palate than the traditional drink of the generation of the 1970s, which was Scotch.
yeah. I just got a count there. I was doing a little bit of research. 2,400 craft distilleries in the States now
Yeah,
producing
crazy,
whiskey.
unbelievable.
2,400, amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's really. Oh, we've a bit to go.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. We have a bit to go, but I mean, that's the US kind of adopted a lot before us. If you think of, when it comes to craft brewing, in the US. I mean, that really exploded about 15, 20 years ago. And, you go to any city in the US and you're going to find, half a dozen to a dozen craft breweries within a 12-mile radius of wherever you are. So maybe that, because that was something that was more prevalent, that when it comes to craft distilling, they're more open to trying different things. Whereas in Ireland, traditionally, you've got to remember, I think as a nation, we were always very skeptical of new things. And we were always, well, if I haven't heard of it, it must mean it's shite. Unfortunately, was the Irish mentality, and to a certain degree still is. I mean, you look at some of the largest brands in the world, they all want to be in Ireland. Why? Because Irish people like big brands. I mean, you just look at over the years. I mean, isn't the for a single store, the busiest Domino's in the world is in Tala, I think.
That's right. Yeah.
When Starbucks opened in the Dundrum Town Centre, it was the biggest opening weekend of any Starbucks anywhere in the world. When one of those clothes companies, the one that you
Victoria's Secrets.
Yeah. Well, the male model, so not Victoria's Secrets, the other one.
I don't know.
It's for 20-year-old kids. I've never been on it. But anyway, when that opened, it broke all records for that company around the world. So Irish people tend to like big brands. And one of the things that, I discovered certainly in my early years in Cooley was the most difficult market in the world for us back then was the home market. Because people tended to be, you were a Jameson house, you were a Powers house, you were a Paddy house, you were a Bushmills house. And you drank what your parents drank. Generally. Whereas you go to other countries and people flip. The US, people stopped drinking scotch to the same extent as was being drank in the 60s and 70s because it was being drank like that in the 60s and 70s. And they flipped to bourbon, and then they flipped to Irish. Yeah. Another example I always use from my time in Denmark is the two biggest breweries in Denmark are Tuborg and Carlsberg. Okay? They're both owned by Carlsberg. But one generation, Carlsberg is the biggest beer in Denmark. The next generation, it's Tuborg. And it just flips backwards and forwards every generation. They're both owned by the same thing, so they're all happy. But it's just because I'm going out, or I've started drinking in Denmark. I think you're 16 or 17 when you start drinking beer. Your dad's drinking Tuborg. Well, I'm not going to drink Tuborg. I'm going to drink Carlsberg. That never happened in Ireland. People just stuck to what they knew. Now, again, we're seeing that beginning to change in Ireland as well, with A, craft beers, which have been for maybe the past 10 years, and B, now all the new distilleries and all the new brands. So, yeah, hopefully it will continue.
Yeah, I do see a trend, John, developing where people are looking for the trying to discover the next big thing, and trying the unknown as well. So, I mean, that's a great thing as well. They're opening their horizons and what's out there. You mentioned there, of course, that you did that graduate program. Where did you go from there, John?
The graduate program back then was only a single year, but I was kept on for a second year. I think it was the first person ever to be kept on a second year in the graduate scheme back then, and we kind of moved around a few things, and I stayed in Copenhagen for a second year, and I took on more responsibility for actually bars in Copenhagen as well. So I became an on-trade sales rep for the distributor, as well as the responsibilities for the Irish portfolio. And then after 2 years, I was offered a full-time position in Copenhagen, and it was just one of those scenarios I had to make up on my mind. Was I going to stay in Denmark and root down in Copenhagen, or move back to Ireland? Well, Dublin was a foreign city to me. I'm not from Dublin. Okay, I went to school in Dublin, but Dublin was as foreign as Copenhagen was. And one of my best friends from Copenhagen had just moved home to Dublin and was renting a house. And he said, "Look, if you want to come back, there's a room for you in this house." So I said, "Yeah." So I came back, and I remember just, a few days after I got back, I got a phone call from Peter Galogly, who was the sales manager or sales director for Ireland with Irish Distillers. And he just said, "Have you anything lined up?" I said, "I've sent off my CV to a few places, And he said, "Well, if you come in to me on Monday, I'll give you a job straight away." So I came back to Dublin and started working in sales for Irish Distillers. And that, I have to say, was a bit of a change, because I was coming from Denmark, where, Irish whiskey was all I was about. And I was coming back to Ireland, working for the company that was responsible for those Irish whiskey brands. but there was no interest in those Irish whiskey brands in Ireland. There was a struggle to sell Jameson and Powers and Paddy. Nobody was interested in expanding a portfolio. Nobody was interested in having more. Certainly in, rural Cavan, there was Powers on the shelf and that was it. You weren't going to get anything else in there. And Irish distillers back then, it was about the wines. It was about Long Mountain from South Africa. It was about Jacob's Creek. And then the big volume players, Hussar, Cork Dry Gin, which was the only gin in Ireland at the time, really. Kiskadee Rum, I think it was another brand, just came into my head there now. I think that was something we had in Irish distillers as well. So that was a bit of a sea change, because I was gung-ho on whiskies for 2 years, and then all of a sudden it's like I'm going in and say, oh, well, I have this whiskey. No, not interested. No, we just want Powers. But, what deal can you do on Hussar for me? So it was a bit of I was kind of like, ooh, what have I gotten into here? So I did that for a few years, and then got out of that when Cuisine de France was starting up, and joined Cuisine de France in sales. And as I said, the best thing to come out of that was I met my wife. She was the marketing manager for Cuisine de France. And as I said, I was a lowly country sales rep, but something clicked. And then I worked briefly in Gilby, so got back into the drinks industry. But then I had a chance meeting with John Teeling, and that changed my career forever. And I remember I met John, met him in his office in 162 Clontarf Road, where he has been from ever since he left college, in the same little small office at the front of the building. And I met Jack as well, his son, Jack Teeling. And Jack was just beginning to take over the reins in Cooley. This was back in 2006. And I met with John and Jack and sat there for probably an hour and a half, just chatting about everything, And I remember driving out of there, and within an hour I got a phone call from recruiter just saying to me, I don't know what you said to John Teeling, but he wants to give you a job straight away. And I was cool, yeah, let's start.
Well, John doesn't impress easily, so you must have done something.
Yeah,
you must have done something very right. So
yeah, definitely. And I was delighted, and I owe him a debt of gratitude. And I say that ever since. He's been like my business mentor. I've learned so much working for John Teeling than I did in the rest of my career. Okay, when I started off, there was a man called Michael Bore, a Danish guy he lives in Greystones, and he was working with Irish distillers, and he brought me in. And then John Teeling, really set me on my path. And I started working with John, and John said, "Look, basically said, I don't have a job for you, but I don't want you working for anyone else." I was like, "Cool." So I'll come in Monday, and started with new business development, basically just knocking on doors. And within a few weeks, I was running the Irish market for them, which was great, because that they were the exciting years in Cooley Distillery. We had nothing apart from really good whiskey. We had no marketing spend. We couldn't afford to do things. Everything had to be thought through. We really had to, mind the pennies. And I used to always use an analogy that, what Jameson spent on the film festival in Dublin was more than our entire budget worldwide for marketing. That's what it was about. So it was almost guerrilla-like tactics. It was doing different things wherever we could. I remember just building up a relationship with the publisher of the match day programs for the Irish rugby team in Lansdowne Road. So Six Nations games, 4 days before it, he's got a free page, and he just calls me up. John, I have a spare page. I'm missing. Someone's pulled out. Do you want it? Knowing that I could turn it around quite quickly, and boom, you're in a Six Nations game. You're flicking through it, and all of a sudden there's a Cooley Distillery. You're almost looking twice at it, going, "How did this happen?" So it's that. But then it was also, also something along the lines of, things were beginning to change, and Irish distillers were beginning to put a focus on their whiskies domestically here in Ireland, but not to a huge extent. I was going around and knocking on doors, just like I did in Copenhagen. I was calling into the Willie Ahern's of the Palace Bar when there was no whiskey. There was whiskey, but there wasn't what there is today, and telling the stories and suggesting what they should do. Going to the Chalks, going to Marcus Houlihan, Long Hall. I just had this concept that, you go to good traditional Irish pubs, and you just tell them about Irish whiskey. They're famous for pulling great pints, but they should also be famous for having good whiskey on the back bar as well.
Yeah.
and telling the story and giving the entire story of Irish whiskey and telling them how Irish whiskey dominate. And these were stories that people weren't telling anyone in Ireland, and really evangelicizing, whatever the word is, the category.
Yeah.
And it was I was the only one doing it at that stage, and
Why were you doing it, John? I mean, what was it that you found, or how did you find that niche that nobody else was really pushing? Because you were obviously promoting the whole category, talking about the historical side of it as well, and talking it was our national drink.
yeah.
How did that come about? Because that wasn't being done.
No, it wasn't being done. And I think it was because, again, I can go back to my tour guiding experience. I
Yeah.
love telling a story. I loved, when I was in Glendalough, bringing people around Glendalough, telling them the story, the Round Tower, the historical facts, all those things. I had personal relationship insofar as my grandparents are buried in Glendalough in the old cemetery, So there were things like that. It was this personal thing. And I took it personally. In all my career, when I've been working with certain brands, I've taken them personally,
Yeah.
and I felt at the time that, certainly these brands, they needed to be out there and you needed to be talking about them. And just like a barman, when an American was walking in and you'd give a bit of a spiel about the Guinness or whatever, it's better here because sure isn't the brewery just up there. Well,
Yeah.
also let's talk about, well, do you know this liquid here was invented in Ireland? You
Yeah.
know, this is our national drink. You might think it's Guinness, but no, it's actually this. It's this what you have in your glass. It's this Tyrconnell, which is after a racehorse that won at odds of 100 to 1. It's this peated single malt, or it's whatever. I just thought there was a story there, and people like stories, and you
Yeah.
you can build a brand around a good definitive story, but it'll only work if the liquid is good.
Yeah.
And in Cooley we had exceptionally good liquid. But we struggled to get liquid on lips because people were not interested in whiskey. A, bars weren't interested in taking it on, and B, consumers weren't. How many times still today do you hear you you jump into the back of a taxi and a taxi man, whatever, and what do you do for a living? Oh, I sell whiskey. Madman's drink. Madman's drink. Never touch it.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, so you're constantly breaking down barriers. Because certainly as my Cooley career changed paths slightly, and I moved maybe away from direct sales and more into the ambassadorial work. I'm traveling to other countries and I'm seeing how they drink whiskey. And I'm getting ideas from different bars and I'm getting ideas from different liquor stores, and I'm coming back. And then, the people who I've built up relationships with Ireland, I'm telling them, well, there's this bar in New York City, and every time you buy a whiskey there, you get separately, a little thing of ice, or you get some mineral water. It's not tap water. Mineral water is on a little a jug beside it. And you know what? They can charge a premium for that because it's the theater. It's
Yes.
the entire effect. And then people are looking over and seeing someone being handed this, and wow, that looks good. What's that? Well, oh, that's an Irish wit. That's Kilbeggan or whatever, or Fercullen. Well, obviously it wasn't back then. I need to throw the brand in every now and then. But it's just seeing these things and bringing those ideas and those concepts back to Ireland, really.
Yeah.
But you're right, nobody was doing it.
Yeah.
I just
Were
couldn't
you? Did you feel the underdog back then when in the Cooley Kilregan days?
Oh yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
definitely. No, and there's no doubt we had a chip on our shoulder about that.
Yeah.
We felt like the underdog because nobody was paying us any attention, and we felt like you should be. And
Yeah.
then, we get to a scenario where Kilbeggan 15 becomes the first, and still to this day, only Irish blended whiskey ever to be named the world's best blended whiskey,
Yeah.
at the World Whiskey Awards. Incidentally, I was judging the blended category last night for the World Whiskey Awards. And certainly the whiskies that I had top were not Irish, So,
Yeah.
and that's not, it's because I have to look at it completely. I have to move away from what I like. It has to be about the liquid itself, what the quality of the actual liquid.
Sure.
So Yeah, we had a chip on our shoulder. I said, Kilbeggan 15 won this award. And in Ireland, I'm going around saying, this whiskey here has just been named the best whiskey in the world.
Yeah.
So what? Nobody's
Well,
heard
was
of
it Connemara really that put Cooley more strongly on the map, though?
it. Possibly because of the point of differentiation. But
Yeah.
Connemara sold very little in Ireland.
Yes.
There was really no interest in Ireland. Um, Tyrconnell was probably one of the better sellers in Ireland, to be honest.
Yeah.
And there was a few things done. Used to sponsor the crossword on the back of the Sunday Independent for years.
Yeah.
Things
Yeah.
like that would stick in people's mind.
It was still such an underrated whiskey as well.
Brilliant whiskey.
At the price points that they are. I mean, 15 and 16-year-old single malts for €90 and cheaper on discount, So.
Yeah. Oh no, phenomenal quality. And Kilbeggan was always a bit of a struggle, but Kilbeggan would be the volume play. That'd be the one you'd see in the supermarkets and whatever, But we had a chip on our shoulder, and we got world's best whiskey, and then the year later we became the first distillery to be named the world's best distillery. And the first Irish distillery ever to get that. And that was a fun time. I remember making those ads and putting them in match day programs at the Six Nations games. And I remember we put back in the day, you don't see it so much anymore, but you get a big billboard and you put it on the back of a truck and you drive the truck around.
Yeah.
And I remember the divils in us, it was one day, it was just after we'd won it, and we'd hired the truck for 3 days, and you set them a route. This is where you want them to go, and I put in a little stipulation that go down around Ballsbridge around lunchtime, and maybe pull up outside on Simmons Court Road around lunchtime. And I pulled up directly outside the Irish Distillers offices. It was like it was pure shithousery, excuse my language. So we did that, and on the side of it is world's best distillery, Cooley Distillery. And I'd say within 15 minutes, our financial controller in the business got a phone call from someone from Irish Distillers just saying, "Look, well done, congratulations, move the effing truck."
Yeah. But I think the fact that you were smaller, you were competing heavily, and you had the limited resources, obviously meant that you had to be more creative.
I've got Tom. How'd you go, look?
Hi. Hi, Tom. That's our youngest guest.
Yeah, that's my youngest. It's all right.
Yeah, very good.
No, he just. I think because my middle lad, whose age is all about YouTube, and when he heard Daddy was streaming live on YouTube, that for him has just made I'm Dad of the Year because of that. So I'd say to have it on in there, and then Tom wanted to see what's going on. But anyway. So sorry, I didn't catch that, Sergius.
No, I'm just saying the fact that you were the underdog, that you did have a limited budget, meant that you really had to, one, be involved in all aspects of the business, and secondly, be far more creative with a lot less.
Yeah.
And that stood to you, obviously, going forward.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It was, you had to, and also there was no escaping the hard yards and the hard work. And, obviously the other side of the Cooley business was the private label and the supermarket brand business, which financed the company. Let's face facts. And I used to always say, I opened up a few of those, one of which was Aldi, back in the early years. But I remember going through the ringer to try to get a listing in Aldi, and all the buying directors coming in and sampling it, bringing Noel Sweeney along with me, to talk the talk, and eventually getting a listing. But I remember that day going home to my wife saying, we hadn't shopped in Aldi ever at that stage, and saying, look, we're going to shop in Aldi this weekend. She goes, why Aldi? And I said, well, if they put every supplier through what I've just had to go through to get a listing, they have the best quality product in Ireland at the best price. And since then, Aldi's where we shop every weekend. Since then, so you open that, and that private label business was what financed the brands. And the beauty of working with an Aldi or a Lidl or whoever is, you got paid on time. So that money is then reinvested into the brands, which literally it was so hand to mouth that, we're paid by that. well, that's going to allow me go over to America for 2 weeks and start walking through one end of Greenville Avenue in Dallas to the far end, knocking on doors, carrying bottles of whiskey, sampling folk,
Yeah.
and building it up the hard way. And, and that's how a lot of brands start off down there. I remember meeting a guy, John, I can't remember his surname, but he had a Canadian whiskey brand. And he literally spent all the time in Texas, just knocking on doors, wearing out shoe leather, and he was eventually, it was a one-man operation, and he was bought out by Campari for millions,
Right.
but just built it up that way. 20 years, just boom, boom, the whole time knocking on doors, building up the brand, and that's the only way you could, because we couldn't take out advertising, we couldn't sponsor bartenders, we couldn't sponsor big events, we couldn't do anything like that. We had the liquid, we had quality liquid, but we just didn't have the money.
But your big day did come. I mean, obviously,
it did.
So Beam Suntory came in, and
it was Beam at the time.
Beam came first, and then Suntory
first.
came.
Yeah. So they did in 2011, 2012. I think the deal went through, and it was huge news.
Yeah.
Because we were just coming out of the sort of crash. Everything was on a low ebb, and then all of a sudden, overnight success. Cooley Distillery is sold. Overnight success. John started
10 years, 15 years.
He first had the idea in 1972 or 1971. So it made headline news. I remember just every newspaper in Ireland was on the headlines. I remember even seeing a copy of the New Delhi Times in India. And it was going
really,
It was fascinating. Wow. It was fascinating to see that, But it was good, and then there was obviously a big change. Both internally, the Teelings exited the business, but also just ways of thinking. In the Cooley days, it was a scenario where I'd come up with an idea, I'd go down to Jack. Jack, what do you think of this? Jack says, "Yeah, sounds good. Go for it. Let's do it," and we do it. Beam, it wasn't like that at all. A lot of red tape, big multinationals. It's different speed, different things. The other side of it was, all of a sudden we had money, we could invest, we could sponsor events. I remember sponsoring events in LA, they were, sponsoring, red carpet events, all that type of stuff. When they launched the brands, like in New York City, there were billboards in New York. When around St. Patrick's Day, again, around the launch, it was a guy who worked for a distributor here in Ireland was over in New York with his wife, hopped into a taxi, and the back of the seats in the cabs in New York, there's different screens that are putting up ads or putting up, the map of where you're going and stuff like that. An advertisement for Kilbeggan popped up on it. It was a different world all of a sudden, and it was interesting. It was a very interesting time.
How did it change then, again, when Suntory came and took over Beam?
There wasn't a huge change. Maybe, how to put this nicely, maybe some of the more extravagant spending was rolled back. Okay. I think Suntory had much more of a longer-term focus, a generational focus. Rather than your typical American multinational, which is, financial period to financial period. And I like the Suntory times, obviously my role changed as well when Suntory got involved, because I not only was responsible for the Irish whiskies, but I took on as, global brand ambassador for Scotch, bourbon, and Japanese. Bit of Canadian as well, depending on what market I was in. So, thoroughly enjoyable time. And it was great to just see the different nuances and the different emphases that a company like that have on different spirit brands and different whiskies and how they work with them. So, it was brilliant. I mean, I remember speaking Suntory Hall in Tokyo. I was asked to present at the Suntory National Sales Conference. So this is like one of the great orchestral concert hall venues in the world. And here's a sheep farmer from County Wicklow standing on stage talking to 1,900 people, simultaneous translation about Irish whiskey. I had to pinch myself. It was like, geez, where's this come from?
I mean, you must have been one of the first, if not the first, global brand ambassador.
Well, John Quinn, I'm sure would.
John Quinn would argue with that one.
Yeah, would
Yes.
argue, and I don't tend to win arguments with John Quinn.
Yeah.
But it was really just John and myself. Yeah, the two Johns.
Yeah.
John probably was more so in sort of South America and places like that, whereas I was doing a hell of a lot more in in Asia and America. Though John obviously was in America, but you got to also remember Tullamore as well around that time. Bigger organization. They were getting a lot of graduate brand ambassadors, so they would have had people all around the world anyway, like
Yeah.
like I started off with, whereas we didn't. Now I introduced that into Beam Suntory, and I started off the graduate program, and we got some great graduates over the years, and it still makes me proud to see some of them that I took on who have gone to really big roles, not just in the drinks industry, but in other industries as well. And they got their start, learning from us. So that's great. But yeah, as far as probably myself and John Quinn certainly.
Yeah. And what was it like in those days going around, world representing Ireland, if you like, in terms of the whiskey?
Yeah, it was brilliant, really, really great. I look at it and I was exhausted the whole time, but you're dealing with different time zones and things like that. But at the same time, I'm seeing parts of the world I never thought I would ever see.
Yeah.
I'm spending, I'm working in the US for over, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, whatever. So I'm going to spend a weekend in San Francisco. It's just, dream job, absolute dream job. But tough because you're up early. A, because you're jet lagged and you're waking up early, but B, you're being picked up at 8 o'clock, 8:30 in the morning. You're not getting back to your hotel till maybe midnight, 1 o'clock, or something like that.
Yeah.
So they're long old days. And then especially when it was not just the Irish, but when I was working with Bowmore, Lefroy, or Jim Beam, they're much bigger brands. Let's face facts. And so there's more expectations on it. And like I remember traveling around Southeast Asia, we were launching the Bowmore Mizunara cask. It was the first single malt, Scottish single malt to be finished in Mizunara oak. And I remember going around with this bottle because we didn't have enough bottles to send to every market. So I'm going around with this bottle in my bag from Jakarta to Singapore to Hong Kong to wherever, and I'm talking about Scotch whiskey. So I was able to flip it over. And when you're outside of Ireland and Scotland, nobody knew, the accents don't really matter. So it didn't matter. John Cashman wasn't an Irishman talking about Scotch whiskey. That meant nothing to them. I was just a non-local talking about Scotch whiskey, someone from the distillery. So that was great. But, as I said, I would always try to get something in about Irish whiskey, even if I was talking about Bowmore or Lefroy. And it just became known in the industry. That's what I would do, And
did you have any conception at all of how significant the role that you were doing for Irish whiskey was at the time?
Not at the time, no. I still don't really, because there were so many others doing, as in, graduates.
Well, there were very few, doing the global brand side.
Doing the global, no, you're right on that. No, I never really put much thought into it. It's one of those things you don't realize you're doing until people say it back to you. Saying like, I heard you talk about Irish whiskey, and you know what? It changed. It changed the way I approach things now, and I've changed my business because of what you've said. Or I've, things. But even on one of the great things about this role and what I've done previously was, just on a person to person level, you're going into some liquor store in rural wherever Pennsylvania, right? Well, no, that's a bad example because they're all government liquor stores, but some other state, right? And you have a small group of maybe 20 people, and you're giving your talk, and you're giving your spiel, and you're sampling through a range of different whiskies. And you're close enough to be able to visually see reactions and changes, and you hear sounds, oohs, ahs, like, or people puckering or whatever,
Yeah.
But sometimes you'll see something in someone's eyes change, just flicker, just a realization. Wow, I like that, And inside you now know. It sounds a bit ridiculous, but you've changed their life.
Yeah.
Not in any major way,
Well,
Well, you've now given them a new experience they, up to that point, had never experienced. And from then on, that might just become their go-to drink. That might be the thing that brings them pleasure when they're having, an alcoholic beverage. That might be every time they drink it, a little flicker happens, that smile appears.
yeah,
And that
yeah,
for me was reassuring. And that for me was, what made me get up in the morning to do it, to do that
yeah.
job. And it was
But it
great.
must be very fulfilling as well, John, to look back and at that role that you did, and very much, as you said, yourself and John as well, being the role models for brand ambassadors throughout the industry.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. But again, it's not things I think about.
yeah,
I don't think about that way.
yeah,
Yeah, I still get people who come up to me who see an old YouTube clip of me from maybe 10, 12, 15 years ago, whatever, and sort of saying, yeah, I learned really a lot there, and now I'm using that. And that's great, because, I've picked up things from hanging out with Fred Noah, Jim Beam, or John Campbell of Lefroy, whatever the new whiskey, Locklee whiskey.
yeah,
Bill Samuels, senior or junior, I mean, in Maker's Mark. I mean, I've been fortunate. I've hung around with some of these icons of the whiskey industry. Shinji Fukuyo of Suntory. Some of the all-time great blenders, great distillers, and I've learned things from them.
yeah.
I've even learned things from John Quinn.
Well, we won't tell John though.
No,
But
we won't.
yeah, I mean, I suppose I wanted to ask you, what are the biggest lessons you've taken away that are non-whiskey related from your experiences?
Um, non-whiskey red. I suppose people are ultimately and intrinsically the same all around the world. Certainly, although we have to bring whiskey into it somehow. I mean, if people
Yeah,
are going out having a whiskey and enjoying themselves, they're out to enjoy themselves and they want to enjoy themselves.
yeah,
Just like if I go out with my mates of a Saturday night after a rugby match and we're having a few pints of Guinness, we're out to enjoy ourselves. And
yeah,
people going out to have a few whiskeys with their mates, they're the exact same. It's just the way they drink it might be different.
yeah.
How they drink it, where they drink it might be different.
I have
But
lots of comments, lovely comments, and a couple of questions just in here,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
John, if you don't mind.
yeah, no problem.
So, Big Al from up north, he says, "Would you ask John?" Well, here I put it up.
Oh, great.
If he reckons the boom in craft distilleries can be sustained.
I would fear that it can't, unfortunately, for a few more reasons. The Irish market is too small to sustain them all, so everyone has to look to go abroad for export. Okay, and that's really how you're going to sustain yourselves. Now, it's all great. You all think, oh, everyone, look at how quick it's moving in the United States of America, right? Let's get there. Well, that's not. You get there, it's only beginning. Okay, because that's where the real work comes into it. But getting there in the first place is going to be difficult because there are less and less importers now. You look at the global world of spirits over the past few years, different amalgamations, another child's going to bed, good night, different amalgamations of companies just eating up other companies. I mean, just look at example, Beam and Suntory. Beam and Suntory
John,
were.
let's get the kids on so they can have their YouTube
No, they're
moment.
gone. They're gone up to
They're
the
gone,
bed.
are they?
Well,
Well.
so just look at Beam and Suntory. There were two separate companies that potentially could have had Irish whiskey, and then they're amalgamated. Now that's down to one company with Irish whiskey brands. You know what I mean? So this is happening everywhere, not just on that global scale, but also on a local scale, where different importers are being bought up, especially in the United States, where the big guys, the Republic National or whoever, are feeding up and eating up the smaller guys. So the route to market is getting a lot more difficult. It is becoming far more difficult to get your product into the market. So that's one of the things people I don't think realize. They think, okay, it's almost like the movie, whatever it is, build it and they will come. Build your distillery, get your liquid out there, and then it's made. Well, it took John Teeling 20 odd years to make it.
Well, look, you saw it in the software industry as well, John. Irish development companies thinking they could go in and go into the States, and they burnt 10 million without even making a dent.
Yeah, Yeah.
You know, so it can be something that
Oh,
happens.
it is, and unfortunately, I fear that there will be some hitting the skids over the next few years. And I'm sure there's some big guys out there just waiting for that to happen in order to hoover up a distillery with all the equipment and stuff like that and a small amount of stock. Now, the other side of that, why, like, sincerely, I hope it never happens. But one of the other reasons why I hope it never happens is what will happen to that stock? Who will get their hands on that stock? And how will that stock then be distributed or sold, or what will happen to it? And I think that's a fear I have as well. But right now, it looks great. It looks great now. But I don't think anyone goes into it with their eyes closed. I don't think anyone goes into it knowing they're going to make a quick buck. You shouldn't. Whiskey isn't something like that. It's a
Well, I
lot
suppose a bit.
play.
I suppose it's a little bit like the craft brewing side of things, in which the small craft brewers essentially get. We saw the case of that BrewDog, was it, or how, where they were taken over by big multinationals. So that may well happen. Let's move on then. Your time in Beam Suntory came to an end. When was it? 2000.
Yeah, just beginning of pandemic. Which great timing. I left Beam Suntory in January of we're 22 or 21, 20.
Yeah.
So January 20, I left Beam Suntory, and I got a lot of phone calls when I went public that I was leaving them, and a lot of offers. And I to every single person, I said, look, I'm taking some time out. I've been traveling so much. My kids had only known Daddy was on an airplane, so I was taking time out, and I said to everyone, call me back in April.
Yeah.
And then March happened. So the phone didn't ring again in April. So I had to change, pretty quickly. And I decided to start doing different gigs for different people. Be it ambassadorial work online, or liquid development, assessing product, suggesting releases, all that type of stuff. I did some work, menu selections for, a 4-star, 5-star hotel, changed their whiskey menu, suggested things like that. And you did whatever you could. And then
you did a lot of consultancy though.
I did, small things, nothing major. And then I went back out on the road again for a period of time. I had a contract that had ended early, but I was being paid up for a few more months, if you know what I mean. Due to a change at the head of that company. So I just saw something that a company, Grace O'Malley, were looking for someone on the road for Musgraves and BWG. And I just went, I was getting, I was being paid for the work that I wasn't doing with this contract that had ended, and I said, hell, let's get back out on the road again. And by that said, it was a year into pandemic. I was going stir crazy because I was used to traveling so much,
Yeah, of course.
And so I went out on the road for Grace O'Malley for 3 months, and it was brilliant. I loved it. It's calling into stores again, something I hadn't done for about 15 years, and thoroughly enjoyed that. And so I was doing that. I was really enjoying, especially the liquid development work, and there were some distilleries I was working a bit more with, and helping them come up with new releases and suggesting what should be released, and some of which have gone on to do quite well. So I'm quite proud of those, but obviously they're all confidential ones. But and one of the other things, I'd always been in contact with Powerscourt throughout all the time, because obviously Noel and myself go way back, from Cooley Distillery days. So I consider Noel a good personal friend, and Noel and I also were IWC judges. I think for most of the years we were the only two from Ireland judging whiskey for IWC. So you're with the likes of Richard Patterson, and you're with Dr. Bill Lumsden, and you're with like all these, again, icons. And that was one of my other pinch me moments. I'm sitting here with these guys who are Hall of Famers whiskey. Some of them are even have knighthoods, and here I am farmer County Wicklow sitting in there. But so myself and Noel were always in contact with each other, and then the then CEO of Powerscourt as well, Alex Pearce, he and I would we touch base every few weeks or every few months. We touch base, and then around this time last year, kind of when the last one of the lockdowns was beginning to open up again. Alex called me and just said, "John, do you want to meet up?" We'd met a few times. I was like, yeah, okay. So we met up again, and he said, "Look, do you want to do a bit of work for us?" I said, "Well, it makes sense."
Yeah, it was handy in Wicklow as well.
Yeah, exactly. There wasn't a long commute. So yeah, I started just doing a bit of consultancy work with Powerscourt on a part-time basis. I still had some of my other projects going on, but then part-time started getting a bit more full-time without being full-time.
Yeah,
and then then a few weeks ago I was offered the position of the head of whiskey. So
yeah,
there was a lot.
Head of whiskey and new product development. So congratulations, firstly. It's a quite a prestigious role and quite all encompassing. So, I mean, what does that role really entail now?
It's pretty much, everything that I do, So obviously, Noel Sweeney left the business in January of this year, which, you can't replace somebody like Noel Sweeney. It's impossible. The man is a Hall of Fame. The man is, the only person in the Hall of Fame who's both a master blender and a master distiller, and nobody can argue he is a master blender and a master distiller. It might be a makey up thing that a lot of people use, but in Noel's case, it's deserved.
Fully justified. Yeah.
So he really had set the groundwork. He'd brought Powerscourt and the type of whiskey that they're making, and of course the whiskey that they acquired, and had done all the releases up until the end of this year. And I said all along, I'm neither a distiller nor a blender. I've no scientific background, but with the exception of Noel Sweeney and maybe Sarah Dowling, nobody knows the liquid out of Cooley Distillery better than I do.
Yeah.
So the obviously all the pre-purchase liquid that Powerscourt has is all ex-Cooley. I mean, that's well known. I'm not breaking any confidentiality agreement there. So I know that liquid. I know what to do with it. I know how it works. I know what it tastes like. I know how it finishes. I know what works well with it. I know what doesn't work well with it. And then the liquid that Noel had started distilling in Powerscourt was what I would call Noel Sweeney liquid. It's light, it's fruity, it's full of maltiness, it's really delicate but clean spirit. I know that style as well, So, part of my role now is to preserve that. The guys know how to distill. I'm not a distiller. I'm not going to tell them how to distill. They know how to do that, but I know the liquid, and now I'm sort of playing around with some of the liquids and suggesting certain things. So that's one side of it. I mean, the other side of it is this whole new product development and coming up with new ideas and new product, bringing that to market. Obviously, Powerscourt is in a scenario now whereby, yes, it has the age stock, but B, its own liquid has turned 3 years of age. It did last August. Now, I vetoed an early release of that because I just didn't think it was ready. Because you can only make a first impression once. And I want it to be absolutely right. So that's taking up a large part of my day right now, is working on that project, because it's not just the liquid is the easy side of it. And that's something I learned from Noel. The liquid is easy. It's all the rest of it that I now have to manage, and especially with timelines today, when everyone knows that just logistics are slower, everything is slower. And so I look at, okay, we want to launch in October. Well, what do we need for that? Well, we need a bottle, we need a capsule, we need a cork, we need labels, we need all of these things. Okay, well, what's the timeline of getting these and start working it back and start managing that? And also what we're looking to release now, in the future is going to be, it's going to be the cornerstone of Faircullen. It's going
Yeah,
to be, it's going to be Powerscourt Distillery liquid. It is what the distillery is going to be famous for. You
yeah,
know, it's it's what's going to make Powerscourt Distillery.
yeah,
Everything has to be right. So a lot of work, and then there's the other side of it. There's the conceptual side of it. Where are people going to drink it? How are they going to drink it? What's going to appeal to? What are we going to make it look like? What's it going to feel like? All of these things. The
yeah.
easiest part is the liquid.
Okay, just a couple of questions then. Obviously, with Powerscourt, the brand having so tightly bound itself to Noel's name, if you like, and being synonymous with
Yeah.
being the master distiller that he is, and also losing the experience as well of the Pierce family, I suppose, as well. Is how do you pivot, and what's the future plan to you base so much on the fact that Noel produced the liquid and so forth. How do you adjust? How do you pivot? How do you continue on from
Yeah.
what is a big setback? There's no easy way.
No, but from now on, and one of the things that I'm getting across to the company is from now on, everything has to be about the liquid, because it's the liquid that people are going to buy. They're not buying it because it was made by somebody. They're not buying it. Well, the way it looks does come into it slightly because people are visual, and people will purchase what looks good. Excuse me. But the liquid is what's important. So that's what I'm trying to get across, and what we're going to do is focus on the liquid from here on in. The liquid is good.
Yeah.
Let's make that the brand story, not the person who made it, or an association with another distillery. No, it's going to be all about the liquid. There's a great book, and I'd urge anyone to read it. It was it's called, again, excuse my language, is about to say that shit will never sell.
Oh yes, yeah. The Bailey's book.
Yeah, it's a brilliant book about brand building and
Yeah.
about, obviously it is the Bailey story, and that's how the man made his money. But I read that book and I went back and I underlined certain things and went, and one of the key tenets and the successful brands that man has been involved, David Gluckman, I think his name is, that man has been involved in, it's been the liquid that has won it through. So that for me, you get the liquid, and that's, I say it when some other some startup distilleries give me a call and sort of say, any advice, John? And my advice is, make sure what you sell, you're good at it, that liquid becomes all about you. And that's what I'm looking to do here with Powerscourt.
Yeah. Are there going to be any big changes in terms of where Faircullen, Powerscourt, the brand, positions itself? I mean, it has been seen, and probably rightly so, positioned as a premium Irish whiskey.
Yeah.
Any change in how that's going to develop?
Well, I suppose we've become a premium whiskey because everything about the Powerscourt estate is premium. You just come up there, you drive up, you see the Sugarloaf, see the house, you got 2 championship golf courses, you got a 4-star, 5-star hotel, and then you got this state-of-the-art distillery turnkey from 4 sides of Scotland, some of the best equipment that money can buy. You come into distillery, you've been there, Serge, you see it. Every touch point, everything you see screams premium. And that is what we're about. We're making premium whiskey. But, excuse me, not all premium whiskey has to be premium price, Up until now, all of the whiskey that we've released is whiskey that we have sourced from elsewhere, So there's already a cost implication of what we have got it at, and then for us to make margin, for us to put it out. Sure. Well, from now on, we have our own aged liquid, So all of a sudden, we don't have that same cost implications. So we can maybe play around and do things differently. Now, we have enough stock of aged whiskey to continue with those sort of 18s, and maybe I'm looking at bringing something even older, and our grain releases and things like that. But we now have an opportunity to bring in, our own Powerscourt distilled liquid, maybe as a blend. Because remember, let's just face facts here: 93% of all Irish whiskey sold around the world is blended. You
Yeah.
know, if you're not in that, you're straight away just working on 7% of Irish whiskey sales. You
Yeah.
know, or probably even less. Maybe that
But I
figure.
mean, that 93% is of that 93%, 90% of that 93
Yeah,
is Jameson.
that's absolutely true. That's absolutely true. But at the same time, it's also at a certain price point.
Yeah.
That if you're going in at single malts, you're going in at single pot distillery, you're going in at others, you're not going to be at that price point. You know,
Yeah.
now we are in a situation. Obviously, we're still going to have to acquire grain whiskey because we're not a grain plant. We are a malt and a pot still plant.
Yeah.
But all of a sudden, a significant portion of our costs are going to be reduced. And yeah, you know, I am looking at coming in at something at that level, and that will become, you know, that will become the volume play, all going well, and that will become, you know, you look at the United States of America. That's not a market that has appealed to us heretofore, and people sort of say, why? You know, that's where all the growth is.
Yeah.
It's not. That's where all the growth is for a certain brand and certain brands at a certain price point. We can't go there right now, you know.
Yeah.
But if we have something that does appeal to that, well, then all of a sudden, to fill the container, you're also going to add in the 18-year-old and a 10-year-old single grain, or your 20 odd, or your limited release, or whatever, you
Yeah.
know. And all of a sudden, it's a much better proposition for us. So yeah, that's something I'm working on at the moment. But I mean, to come up with a brand that's going to be, you know, your brand, and ultimately, also, you know, the dreamer in me is it becomes one of the biggest whiskey brands in the world.
Yeah.
You want to get it right, you know,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
because nobody sets out to do something half-arsed. You know,
I know. I know. I mean, the challenges are definitely there. But you're probably talking 2 to 3 years before you really have the sustained throughput of your own liquid to really go out and hit the market with something of your own consistently.
Oh, well, depends on how much you've been making in the past 3.5 years.
Well, that's true, I guess. Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, you have large capacity there.
We do,
Yeah.
and we're not even at full capacity.
Yeah.
So
Another question I've been
yeah.
asked as well is, who's likely to fill the position of Noel, or is that going to be taken in house?
Look, we don't know. As of right now, as far as the company is concerned, I'm looking after the liquids, the whiskey. We haven't stopped distilling. But as I said, I'm not a blender. I am not a distiller.
Yeah.
Look, we'll probably look to get somebody in, but it's impossible. You're not going to replace an old Sweeney, are you? You know,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
impossible to replace an old Sweeney. So
Well, I mean, that's one thing that's happened, and I've noticed happening over the last year, certainly, is the amount of transitions happening within the industry. So you do see
yeah.
a lot of movement of distillers from, leaving the industry,
Yeah.
moving brands. So is that causing a big problem in recruitment? Is that a big challenge for distilleries?
I would say so, because you got to remember, traditionally, 10 years ago, there weren't distillers in Ireland. You
Yeah.
know, there was Noel, there was Noel's team in Cooley.
Yeah.
You know, there was the team in Middleton, and there was a team in Bushmills, and that was it. You know,
Yeah.
young Irish people weren't getting into distilling because it
Mhm.
wasn't an option. There was no job for them.
Yeah.
You do a science degree, you might end up working for a distillery in Scotland, you know, in a lab.
Yeah.
You know, all that's changed now. I mean, now there's, you know, Carlo has a course. I think does DIT have a course as well? Not
That's
sure.
right. Yeah.
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 So, you know, the opportunities are there now, and the path, the career path is there now, which certainly wasn't there 10 years ago.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's a problem getting distillers. I'd say the problem is at the you know, to get the experienced distillers. That's where
Sure.
the issues are, and that's probably why there has been movement, because
Yeah.
experienced distillers, you know, are
Hard to
are
come
worth,
by.
you know, hard to come by and worth a few quid. So yeah,
Yeah.
there's movement.
A couple of questions here,
Yeah.
John. So Peter is asking, will you use Powerscourt as the brand name for your own liquid?
No.
You
Our
stick with.
brand, our brand is for Cullen. You got to remember, Powerscourt really only has any bit of relatability here in Ireland. we know Powerscourt. We've heard of Powerscourt and we understand that. But you go to a consumer in Binny's in Chicago and you say Powerscourt or Furcullen, they both say, well, I don't know what either of them are.
Yeah.
So a brand name's a brand name, you know. But Furcullen is, you know, the old Celtic name for the region. A lot of history behind it, and it is our brand name.
Yeah. Another question then from Connor. Connor, who is working in Cooley at the moment.
Yeah.
Any advice for the new generation of Irish whiskey brand ambassador?
Look, advice: just be yourself. You know, the one thing I used to always say to the grads that I take on. First thing, it is a job. There is a career. You can get a very good career out of this, out of a role like that. Treat it as a job. You're working with a product which, you know, if abused, is dangerous. You treat it with respect. You respect what you do. You respect the people who are drinking it, and you respect when you are drinking it. You are the ambassador for yourself, for your brand, and ultimately, in a lot of cases, for your country. You know. And the other thing I often say to local ambassadors or sort of junior ambassadors as well, that I've trained is, you know, when they go into market, I mean, they're 23-year-old grad as I was, and it can be a little bit daunting because let's face facts, there are people within the whiskey industry who like to say, no, you're wrong, or no, that's not right, or try to put their opinion on someone. And especially if it's a 23-year-old young graduate, be it male or female, it doesn't matter, who is trying to get a story across. I just say to them, just remember, look around that room when you go into it. And remember, you know more than everybody in that room. I was like, well, you mightn't. But nobody in that room has spent time with John Cashman in the distillery. You have. Nobody has spent time learning masterclasses or, you know, meeting Noel Sweeney or whoever it is.
Yeah.
You have. And just remember that. Go in with your bit of confidence, be yourself, but always respect what you're doing because it is alcohol.
Yeah. Another question that a few more questions are coming in thick and
okay.
All right.
Cool.
So not that one. Oh yeah. Well, so Mick is asking what is your go-to drink?
Yeah.
Other than Furcullen.
Yeah, no, it varies. It is a Furcullen 8 in the glass here this evening. No, it does vary. I would drink a lot of Maker's Mark. I have to say, I absolutely love Maker's Mark whiskey. Even before I worked for them, I always liked it, and then it was essentially like a dream come true. You know, you're in the distillery of one of the brands that you've always loved, and you're hanging around with the son of the founder of the distillery, and you're going into the warehouse and all that. Like, it was just a dream come true. I think it's well known within the industry, certainly in Ireland, that my all-time favorite whiskey is a Bowmore, Bowmore White Sands, the 17-year-old. And there was a period of time where the cheapest place in the world to purchase that was Dublin Airport. Thankfully, it was also a time when I was flying quite a lot, so I was picking up a bottle every single time. And but then I made a mistake of saying that at an Aviators whiskey event. For people who don't know, that's the whiskey club of people who, well, it started off as a whiskey club for people who work in Dublin Airport. Yeah. It's now branched out. Very good club. And I said it at it one day, and some of them went off and bought all bloody White Sands. It was gone next time I went. It was my own stupid fault. Now they still tease me about it. One guy in particular, if you're watching, Paul, I know. So it's so that, you know, I do love Bowmore. Bowmore for me was, you know, when I was growing up, when I was starting in this industry, Bowmore was an aspirational whiskey. It was something that I thought I would only really start drinking when I really truly understood whiskey and could understand the nuances. And, you know, it got to a stage where, yes, I started drinking it, and then I became their global brand ambassador. And, you know, still to this day, many highlights of my career, but one of them was when David Turner, the distillery manager, just threw me the keys to the number one vaults, which is the oldest maturation warehouse in all of Scotland, the famous number one vaults in Bowmore, threw me the keys and said, go in and try some of that 30-year-old Oloroso, just help yourself. It's like,
and you came out.
Yeah. Oh, I did just about, you know.
Cobus is asking there, any pots still coming? I presume there is.
Yeah. Hey, Cobus, good to see you again, even though I don't see you. Yes, we have made pot still whiskey, and we are continuing to make pot still whiskey. So we will have pot still. Our plant is set up for malt whiskey and pot still whiskey. So we have made both. The pot still whiskey is an interesting one because the unmalted barley is from the estate itself. So we have that element coming into it. Being on a large estate, we can do that. So that's something to look forward to. We've done double distilled malt, triple distilled malt. We've also done, of course, peated malt. Just think of some of the things Noel has done in the past, and it's been replicated. And yes, there will be pot still down the line. But pot still for me, look, I personally think pot still doesn't get drinkable till it's about 7 or 8 years of age. That's just a personal choice. So if I'm in Powerscourt, you can be damn sure it'll be a few more years before we release a pot still.
Well, that's kind of reassuring. One of the points I wanted to ask was in terms of experimentation. Will you be experimenting with different mash bills? Will you be experimenting? I think you mentioned to me something, you're doing some collaborations going forward.
Yeah, one of the things that I brought to the distillery was owning your home area, and not so much like in a Vladimir Putin way, but in a collaborative way. That I said, let's just take a map of North Wicklow and South County Dublin, and stick a pin in Powerscourt and take a bit of string, and do a 6-mile radius around. Well, you're probably hitting 300, 400,000 people, right? Yeah. So we need to try to get across that we're your local distillery. And there are people in Foxrock who know that in 15 minutes' time, they can be Powerscourt Estate, and there's a whiskey distillery there with whiskey that is available in their local O'Brien's, and that's what we need to start getting across. And the other ways of doing that is collaborating with local establishments, be it bars, be it hotels, letting them know, look, your guests can come on up. We'll have a special offer, a 2-for-1, a 20% discount, whatever. Get people through the door, get liquid on lips, get people talking about us. But then look at other organizations and other businesses in the area. So I've started, I didn't start it. Sorry, you had started, but I've been pushing it out more, collaborating with some of the craft breweries in County Wicklow. So I'm just about, and here's a exclusive for you. I'm just about to release over the next few weeks a distillery exclusive, only available in our distillery. There'll be a few bottles online, and it is a grain whiskey which has matured in our barrels, which went to the Wicklow Brewery in Red Cross, literally 6 miles from where I'm sitting right now. And they put their anniversary Imperial Stout in at 12-12-20. And they let it sit in it for about, I think, 12 weeks, 8 to 12 weeks, I think they had it in. We got the barrels back, filled grain whiskey into it. I was looking to do something different in the distillery. I tasted this and went, ooh. Yeah, so that's coming out in the next few weeks.
We have a distillery exclusive, is it?
Distillery exclusive. Look, another thing that people who know me and have followed maybe my career, if that doesn't sound too ridiculous, I like to release whiskies at a price that are drinkable. So I'm not breaking the bank. I'm not putting any tertiary packaging on this. There's no tube, there's no box. It's a bottle on a shelf that's going to be affordable. That's going to be really, really good quality, and you're going to want to drink it. Yeah. And when you drink it, you're going to want to come and buy another one if it doesn't sell out so quickly.
Well, we've seen that in some of the Kilbeggans that you released. The Kilbeggan Rye and Pot Still. So I'm looking forward to that one. You just fall in that. You fall in that 6 mile radius of where I live, or where I did live. So that was one of the downsides to moving.
Exactly. So yeah, that's some of the collaborations. Then today we're just doing, there's a beer about to hit the market this week by O'Brother Brewing, who are based in Kilcool. There's 3 brothers behind it. John Wilson just wrote a piece about him in last week's Irish Times. And they're releasing a new beer called Opus One, which is an Imperial Stout. And again, they've done it slightly differently. They've used our barrels, but they've used a cross selection of malt and grain barrels. So they've used those barrels, put their beer into it, let it mature. And this is a big release for them. A big 12.5% Imperial Stout.
What's their name again, John?
It's called Opus One.
Opus One, okay.
By O'Brother Brewing. And so I think it should be hitting the shops probably towards this weekend. And I've just got those barrels back. Now, because it was a
Mhm.
much larger thing, I hope to, put some liquid into it, and it'll be a larger release that maybe won't be just a distillery exclusive, but something down the line. Maybe look out for it next year. I would say, from just timelines of maturation or whatever, So that's something, I want to reach out to other breweries around Wicklow, but not only that, but farms. We do a food and whiskey pairing option. In the distillery, we've really been to the forefront of that, and for that we'll use, like, all our cheeses come from the Hempensell family, and just outside Arklow in South County Wicklow. We use honey. The honey is in the beehives right next to the distillery on the estate. So just trying to collaborate as much as possible with locality, and build this up. This pride, and it's something I really learned from my time in Scotland. You
Yeah.
go to the village where Glengarry Distillery is, and God forbid if you were to order something else other than Glengarry,
Really. Yeah.
or any of those things. There's so much pride in the locality, and that's been lacking in Ireland for quite a lot. And I'm just trying to pull all that together.
Yeah, I know that one of the other things would be shame not to mention as well, the collaboration, the food collaboration you're doing with Santina there
Yeah,
as well. That's particular because I mean that is a big attraction for people coming in, and I know you're doing weddings and things as well.
yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah.
so is the visitor center fully open?
It is, but it's still slow because we don't have many visitors right now yet.
Yeah.
This summer we're expecting it really to pick up. But yeah, we have function rooms, so we hold conferences, and we hold business day outs, that type of thing. We also do we do weddings, we do day twos of weddings, we do all that type of stuff. So, like, you've been there, you've seen, we have these phenomenal rooms. We have a full bar upstairs. We have tasting rooms, we have conference rooms, we have all types of things. But we are first and foremost a whiskey distillery, and we're making exceptionally good whiskey, which will come to market over the next short while. So it's going great. It really is.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, obviously the last couple of years has been a real mess, but some, it's actually opened opportunities up for some. But going forward and looking at the future, what are the challenges for Powerscourt and I suppose for the Irish whiskey industry going forward over the next couple of years? What do you see those challenges being?
Well, the initial challenge obviously is route to market, finding the right partner, and it's something I learned in the Cooley days, and it's when you don't have the support or the backing of a large multinational, every market you go to is you're higgledy-piggledy with the partners that you choose,
Yeah.
and some are going to be much better than others, and that's just the nature. And some are going to be failures, and you're going to have to cut your losses and start over again, and you're going to make loads of mistakes, more mistakes than you're actually going to get positives. And it's about building up relationships and partnerships. A classic example of that is, our biggest export market is China, and the reason for that is we built up this relationship with our Chinese partners, and we're a good trust scale now, and we're doing well in those in that market, and that market being so massive, we're only in one little small area, but we're still selling more there than we are anywhere else around the world, with the exception of Ireland. So one of those big issues is going to be, route to market, and how people do that. The second one, and I hope it doesn't come to pass, is, the last time Irish whiskey was really, really dominant and really, really flying, people started cutting corners. People started, trying things because it was a gold rush, and we need to get it out there, so let's get it out there as soon as it possibly should be out there. And the old expression, one bad apple rots the whole basket, or whatever the expression is. But and you don't want that to happen anymore. And I think that's one of the things where the Irish Whiskey Association really comes in, because the Irish Whiskey Association has been great at collaborative effect. And I'll get a phone call from somebody from a distillery saying, "John, do you know anything about this market, or do you know this distributor?" And I'll say yes, no, or whatever, or can you help me out? Is there something wrong with this liquid? And I'll sample it and stuff like that. And there is that great collaborative effect, and that's really something like the Irish Whiskey Association, which over 97% of all Irish whiskey sales are members of the Irish Whiskey Association. So, and it is very much a member based grouping. It's one person, one vote. Not dominated by the bigger players. So I think things like that are great, where you have this collaborative effort, and committees, and all these different committees, of which, like, I chaired one of them in the Irish Whiskey Association, trade promotions for a few years, and it's you got the small distilleries and the big distilleries working together for the for the one aim, and that is for the betterment of the entire industry. And so long as that continues, I think we'll be in a good place.
Yeah, I saw they were doing a week's on Africa, the Irish Whiskey Association. So kind of trade talks on Irish whiskey in Africa. So that's another market, I presume. That's a big one.
It is, and again, definitely been led by Jameson, and I see again, Cobus is I think in Johannesburg. When I had my honeymoon out in South Africa a few years ago now, and it was the only country I'd ever been to outside of Ireland where I saw billboards for Jameson. I saw Jameson in the back bar of every bar that I went into all around Cape Town or wherever I was. So again, it's Jesus goes. Again, it's been something that's been spearheaded by Pernod Ricard, but you also see other growth areas like Nigeria has had phenomenal growth in the past past few years. Ethiopia, and Mozambique, a lot of countries doing really well for Irish whiskey, and it's a difficult market for some of the smaller guys to get into. But at least with that collaborative effect and having the help of something like the Irish Whiskey Association, who put on that event this week to give people ideas and tell people how you do business in these countries, is great.
Yeah. Listen, John, I'm really going to wish you the very best of luck going forward with the new career. You've got your hands really full. It's a big role with a lot of bits to connect together. But I mean, just the feedback here and the comments from the people here in the chat, they've been very warm, so complimentary towards you, and really respectful and admiring of what you've done. So that's a nice, wish to be given, I'm sure. Definitely. But on a personal front, what do you see happening then in the next while?
On a personal front, a few new releases this year. Obviously, the first of which will be this distillery exclusive. I also have a big aged release coming out in conjunction with a famous whiskey bar in Dublin. I'd say anyone can read between the lines and guess. And then I have part of my role with new product development is to have a series of releases over the next few years. And I said certainly a lot of it is taken up now with this cornerstone of the future of the distillery and having that right. But then there's other things as well. As I said, we're fortunate to have all this aged liquid, and we're fortunate to have had Noel's experience in A, getting that liquid, but B, getting different casks as well. And I like to experiment with different finishes. Not all will see the light of day, but I have some very interesting ones there that I'm playing around with right now. So personal level, I just hope to continue doing that and be able to bring the distillery on from the work that has been laid down by the team that's there, from the founders of the distillery and those like Alex Pearce and Noel Sweeney who have moved on. So it's going to be exciting. Busy.
Well, I mean, you've got a beautiful distillery, you've got fantastic facilities, beautiful grounds, great liquid. So the rest is the hard work, I suppose, and getting it out there and getting it to market. And look, with your wealth of experience, I think it's fantastic. I mean, you really have done the full series of roles within the whiskey industry. You've seen it really from the consumer to the account manager to the brand ambassador to product development and consultancy. So it's a fantastic career. So congratulations, John. I mean, you did a lot in the 20 years, actually,
and a few of those were meeting my wife from Cuisine de France selling bread rolls. So
well, there you go. Well, look, thank you very much. I really wish you the very best of luck going forward in your career. You've always been a very great friend and a great supporter of the show. So anytime I've had questions, you've been really open and giving a great insight. So really very much appreciated. Next time, I'd rather you sit on this side and
I will do that.
Yeah, but look, thank you again so much. Best of luck. Say hello to everybody. We'll be down at the distillery soon. And,
cool, brilliant. Thanks, Serge.
Launch it. Best of luck with all the progress. Take care. Bye-bye. So thanks to John. A mind full of experience there. Fantastic to get an insight. Wish him the best of luck. It's not going to be easy, but John has the experience and the know-all to do it. So thank you all for joining us. If you have enjoyed the show, please do subscribe or follow our channel or follow us on Facebook. These podcasts do come out at no charge. They are there for the public to be consumed and enjoyed freely, and we'd like to keep it that way. And if you share it, it helps us do that. So thank you very much, and we will speak to you next week with something a little bit different. So take care. Slánta.